Okay. This is a fake thing. This is the Onion. Okay, this is the Onion, so I don't think this is real, but...
News out of Washington where we have... Breaking news out of Washington where we have just received word that SEAL Team 6 has carried out a daring overnight operation, successfully killing a student protester. White House sources are confirming that 19-year-old college sophomore Evan Dixon was indeed executed last night by an elite team of special forces after his location was revealed to be deep within the walls of this University of Pennsylvania dormitory. Senior political analyst Jason Copeland has been in close personal contact with the White House and joins us now with the latest.
Thanks, Dwight. Yeah, we're standing by as moments from now, President Trump is expected to address the nation and confirm the success of Operation Sitting Eagle. It was late last night that President Trump reportedly authorized the raid, which sent 25 highly trained military personnel into UPenn airspace, commanding them to, quote, show no mercy.
President Trump, of course, has said several times he would make it his personal mission to find and kill Dixon after he claimed responsibility for a student-led sit-in last semester. Jason, what do we know so far about the actual details of the raid?
Yeah, it was a high-risk operation that was almost over before it started. We're hearing reports that one of the two Black Hawk helicopters used in this mission actually suffered mechanical failure upon campus entry and crashed into Quaker Kitchen Dining Hall, where soldiers did encounter some resistance from several freshmen and at least one 19-year-old RA.
Right.
Now, from there, the remaining SEAL team members stormed the quad before breaching Stouffer College House, where inside their thermal cameras picked up a shirtless, groggy Dixon surrounded by dirty laundry, textbooks, and it was then that President Trump himself made that difficult, harrowing call to open fire, subsequently taking out the dangerous English major in his clandestine dormitory bunker.
As you can see, hundreds of Americans are now gathering around the country to celebrate and to thank President Trump for finally putting an end to this national nightmare. Jason, what happens to this group of student protesters now?
Yeah, well, only time will tell, Dwight, but despite today's successful operation, the university system in the region still remains extremely unstable, still believed to harbor some enclaves of free speech, so I wouldn't rule out a full-scale ground invasion of all college campuses in the near future.
All right. Thank you, Jason. With many questions yet to be answered, ONN can confirm that President Trump has explicitly ordered the body of Evan Dixon to be dumped in the Delaware River so no grave could serve as a site of pilgrimage for other politically engaged citizens. Coming up next, more on the latest executive order that has many asking, should trans people be allowed to watch women's sports?
Okay.
Oh my god, I think I'm gonna start throwing bombs for like fake flashing with a bomb.
Here it is.
Yo! Does Brokey follow it?
Slips off the ledge.
Yeah.
What?
Wait.
Huh? No!
Oh my god, I think I'm gonna start...
Wait, what? Wait.
Oh my god, I think I'm gonna start throwing bombs for like fake flashing with a bomb.
Here it is.
Yo! Does Brokey follow it?
Slips off the ledge.
Yeah.
What?
Wait.
Huh?
Oh my god.
Okay. Wait, hello?
Hello?
Why are you in stream disagreements?
Should I be waiting in your room?
Yeah, just wait here. Makes me pressured. Makes me feel like I have to join.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm still trying to figure out the best way to signal you. I didn't want to get in the way of your Hassan coverage.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, so let's see. Pull up my notes. Have you been following the Wisconsin Supreme Court at all other than that election that happened?
Nope.
Okay. So there was a decision that came out pretty recently that I thought might be interesting to discuss just because of kind of some questions it might lead to. So there was a bill that was passed, I believe, last year, just around funding for students in through 12 schools. Mm-hmm. And the bill originally said, for the year 2024 through 2025, you can have funding up to $325 per student.
Okay, wait. What is this funding for? Where does it come from? What are we talking about exactly?
It's just a state. It's just in the state of Wisconsin.
Okay.
Just, they're raising funds. Whether I'm not super sure, but usually this stuff is usually done through bond measures.
Okay,
or
and this
just
funding
through
is
property
for,
taxes.
is the state of Wisconsin, the funding's going to what, the school or?
Yeah, just the schools, and it's on a per student basis.
Gotcha, okay.
And saying, hey, we're increasing it by this much.
Gotcha.
Got through both houses, or got through their Congress. I'm not sure whether they're bicameral or not. But it got through the Congress, goes to the governor. Governor says, okay, I'm going to sign it, but I'm going to do a line item veto. I'm going to take out the 2, the 0, and the hyphen, so that now the bill reads that it will last until 2425 for the next 400 years. So she literally just removed like 3 characters from it.
Gotcha.
Signed it, moved on, and obviously, people challenged it, and it went to the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Okay, and then
last
let me, real
3
quick, I'm
times-
guessing the reason why this is important is because in the Wisconsin state legislature, if a senator, or I'm sorry, if the governor wants to significantly change some piece of legislation, it probably has to go back to the state assembly or whatever to renegotiate. But if you veto a certain thing, you can just pass it without having to send it through the Senate and the House or whatever. Is that why this is a big deal, or?
For multiple reasons. One, Wisconsin is the only state that allows for line item vetoes. There's no line item vetoes federally either. It was a really big contentious thing in a lot of cases in the past, and people generally look disfavorably upon line item vetoes because it's kind of like the governor or the executive then gets to just kind of turn the bill into whatever they want, right?
Sure.
Like here, it's pretty clear they weren't trying to set funding policy for schools for the next 400 years.
Sure.
They're trying to do it for 1 year, and then they can change it up. I believe Bill Clinton had a similar conflict during his time, so Wisconsin does allow it, but they also recently had an amendment that kind of limited that power, and there's a lot of pushes just to get rid of it. And you're right, though, that there now is a change to legislation that doesn't involve the legislature, which a lot of people find to be foundationally an issue. Now, this governor has done this 3 times before. They all got challenged. They went to the Supreme Court of Wisconsin, and all 3 times they got shut down. Now, recently, we have a new Supreme Court justice there, so now that it is a 4-3 for liberals, and it was approved by the Supreme Court. There's no clear test on why they should be approved or not. It's all just kind of the court just deciding one way or the other. There's not a test for it right now. So a lot of liberals are saying, oh, this is a big win. Oh, this is why we wanted to have this Wisconsin Supreme Court so that we can do things like this, right? So right out of the gate.
Wait.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, right out of the gate, I feel this feels not good to me, I think.
Good.
Yeah, this seems very bad.
Okay. So real quick, let me give you a small kind of argument for why some people like line item vetoes. A lot of people think that they're good whenever they're not applied this way, where you would just take out a line or a section.
Yeah, I can understand. The motivation for a line item veto. If I had to guess, it's you get a huge bill. It's been deliberated upon for months and months and months, and there's legislative sessions and there's committees, and then as the bill hits the executive's desk, maybe there's a situation's changed or something is going on or there's an election or whatever. And it's there's one very minor thing that's not really relevant to the entire bill. Maybe one city annexed another city. So we're just going to X this thing out and then we're going to pass the bill. It doesn't change any of the actual substance of the bill. In those cases, rather than sending it back to the House or sending it back to the representative body to redeliberate and potentially never pass the bill. In that case, I guess a line item veto, I understand it, but not for changing any of the substance of the bill.
And
right?
You could even say, okay, even those line item changes then you could say, okay, was a supermajority going to overrule that line item? And that would show whether or not there's the support there for that specific thing changed, right?
Sure.
So you could have a functional line item veto that actually did have a purpose and helped in ways, but also it could, be abused by an executive. Okay, so you generally don't like how this feels, this person doing it. And to be clear, this is a liberal or I believe it's a Democrat governor.
Sure. Also, I don't care about the party affiliation. That should never factor into, ideally, right, how we view any of these things. But yeah.
Right. I feel like, and I think that I agree with you. I feel like I can, from a principled stance, say, yeah, I think you're right on that. However, considering the era we're in and considering who is in the White House and the way these people are acting and the way that they're doing, do you feel like this is how Democrats should be acting? She didn't break any rules. She didn't. The Supreme Court of her state upheld it, and as far as I understand, I don't believe there's any way for the Supreme Court of the United States to look at this. Though I haven't read the ruling, and I can't make that statement with any real confidence. But let's assume they can't. So she's in the clear, and she did something that is good, right? It's
I mean, if those are the rules, if that's the way that it's written, then she should take full advantage of the rules that are written. And if Wisconsin doesn't like that, which I don't think Wisconsin should, then the legislature should change it.
Right. So, well, this would require a constitutional
amendment. Sure, that's fine. Yeah, but then amend it.
But so okay, so then you but to be clear, right? She's breaking norms. She's going against 3 recent Supreme Court rulings that overturned similar things.
Wait. I'm sorry. Can you explain that? What do you mean she's going against recent? I thought you said the court said that this was totally okay.
There were so she did 3 other line item vetoes during the previous Supreme Court of Wisconsin, whenever it was a 4-3 in the conservative favor. Those 3 times it went in front of the court, it got knocked down. Now, I can't say whether or not it's for the exact same reason or if there was a significant difference there, but it's very clear that the Supreme Court previously didn't support this, and it's very recent.
Well, it didn't support those particular line items, right?
Well, it didn't support her exercising her line item veto in this way. I can do more reading and give you a stronger analysis, but I think just for the sake of the discussion, let's just say she did a similar style of line item veto. Previous court said, stop doing this 3 times. We get a new court. She does it again. This new court says it's okay, right? Now, I personally am okay with this in the sense that I think that Republicans have set the bar, and if Democrats, continue to not fight on the same playing field, then essentially it's over, right? I think that her doing something like this, breaking norms and then going against previous, kind of the spirit of previous rulings, I feel like this is where the Democrats should be headed. Of all right, y'all don't want norms, and y'all want to play only by the letter of the law.
Yeah, I would say fuck norms, follow the letter of the law. There's a lot of different stuff that's going on here in terms of the analysis. So like the law sounds bad to me, mainly because it seems like it usurps. Truly all of the power from this line item veto. It sounds like all of the power of that is being usurped to the judiciary, which seems improper. So I'm opposed to it on that because it seems like it should be a thing dealt with by the Congress or the state assembly or whatever. And then, but if that is the law, if that is how it's written, then Republicans have already shown that they have a total disdain for any kind of norm. I wouldn't rely on any norms anymore. If you can do it, then fucking do it. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Okay, and so let's say Democrats have put themselves in position, whether it's state, federal, local, anything like that. Let's say we have Democrats in positions where they can start acting this way more to the benefit of the Democratic Party. I think it's important to note that in this, it's pretty clearly just to the benefit of governance, right? Like the focus that Democrats seem to have over a consolidating Democrat power, right? This doesn't really further Democratic power, or Democrat as in the party power in Wisconsin, other than maybe people are happy that their kids got more funding for their school, so they'll vote for Democrats more, but there's no direct benefit to the Democrat Party. Well, do you think that if she said, okay, I'm going to do a line item veto and it's going to just explicitly favor Democrats over Republicans, do you think that you would still feel that way?
Yeah, sure. If that's the law, if you don't like the law, change the law. But we shouldn't rely on norms at all anymore, because Republicans have shown that they are demons. They have absolutely no respect for any norms. So yeah, if that's the law and you don't like the law, then change the law. And it sounds to me like a shitty law.
Yeah. So okay, then let's say we have those. Sorry, I started a hypothetical and interrupted myself. But we have Democrats in various levels of power. They're doing things like this. Do you think then Democrats should be at the same time? Maybe not offering, but at least being open to a kind of path to codification of norms that would prevent abuses of power, right? Like, there's you're familiar with Ryan Macbeth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He has a good saying that I like, or a good little phrase he like, where he says, "Give your enemies choices, not problems, because if there's problems, they might act erratic. They might just break the whole thing, and you can't control that. If you give them choices, you can adapt to. You can be prepared for each of those choices, no matter which one they pick, and be ready for them.
You're also mind controlling them in a way too, right? It's the difference between telling your kid like put your coat on versus like would you rather wear your coat or would you rather wear some other thing? If it's cold outside, you give them a choice and you can kind of mind control them as opposed to giving them an ultimatum and then they're going to fight you on it, right? Yeah.
Exactly. We do it a lot in negotiations in my area of the law, where we say, okay, instead of the amount of money that you want, here's these 2 ways we could go.
Sure.
Anyways, do you think that Democrats should be like? Do you think what level of like off ramp or what kind of off ramp do you see that should accompany this? Do you think none at all? Like, fuck it, the Republicans have the full amount of responsibility to pull us out of this, or like the first chance we get to codify, they, go back to norms
in Wisconsin or in
just generally like how Democrats should be acting? Because to me, I think that if we are in this new realm, not only should we try to codify norms and make it where this kind of thing can't ever happen again, but to me, I think it's almost advisable for Democrats to say, well, we're going to play in this space with you guys until we know we're never going to lose power, or at least we're not going to lose power for the foreseeable future. And then we codify. Because if we just get, let's say, to parity power between the Democrats and the Republicans, and then the Republicans go, well, there's gridlock, so we want to codify these rules. And then I feel like we haven't actually addressed a lot of the underlying problems, right? Like there's this bad behavior, there's this illegal actions being taken, and we need to get power away from those actors. We don't want to just start making more rules that could help prevent it that they're just going to break in the future. So do you see...
they should codify it. And Democrats should play in the meantime with the current existing rule set. The next Democrat president that comes in should absolutely start committing... he should just escalatingly start committing crimes. So if there are votes in Congress that need to happen and a Republican bill looks like it's going to pass, send the DOJ to go harass and arrest a Republican lawmaker, or or hire somebody personally to go and do it. Something that would be much more obviously like a crime. And then when Democrats say, hey, so do you want to pass a bill that makes it so the president can't commit crimes yet? Or do you want to stick with the Supreme Court ruling that gave immunity to the president for committing crimes until the Republicans are unwilling to change? Then just have the president keep committing crimes until they change their mind. And then that's it. And then use it to short power or to pass an agenda or whatever. But yeah, because I think one of the issues that's happening right now, and it's one of the reasons why, and maybe I'm not even communicating this well, I don't actually give a fuck. It's one of the reasons why I am so unhinged, and I will make fun of dead firefighters and dead dipshit Air Force women that are trying to climb through windows to go and attack congressmen, is you shouldn't endure double standards and play by the rules on one side and have the other side be completely and totally fucking unhinged. One of the big complaints that I get before is one of the reasons that these Republicans are so effective, and one of the reasons why they can steal so much power for themselves, is because they know that they're fighting against an enemy that is just a more moral enemy than them, right? That's why no Republican was scared at all that criminal immunity was granted to the president while Biden was in office, because no Republican really thought that a Democrat would abuse it. But it's why we're all petrified with Donald Trump in office now, demonstrating the full effect of what a horribly, well, not the full effect, but what a broken government can do with their DOJ. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I think there's kind of an inverted perception when it comes to the actual politicians versus the regular people, the lay people. I think that you're right in the sense that like Republican lawmakers were not afraid of Joe Biden acting illegally, blah blah blah, all that stuff. But sure as fuck, Republican voters did. Like when you talk to conservatives, they already think that they're committing all these crimes, right? And and whenever you talk about any kind of government expansion with a Republican, if they don't like it, they go, well, this is how the Democrats are going to abuse it against us, right? So it's kind of interesting. Like, I agree with your assessment, but it's kind of interesting how like the Republican voters aren't a hair trigger for that.
Here's something that I think was important. I wish I could remember who said this. When you're talking about messaging on stuff, I think it might have even been Gavin Newsom that said this, maybe. There's some stuff that we should just give, like trans athletes. Just fuck it. Okay, this is not worth it. Okay, it's not. There are so many other things. There are other things that might be like optics L's, but they're worth fighting for, and it's worth changing people's minds on them. So when people say things like the Democrats, or I'm sorry, that there are Republicans who are actually afraid of certain things, like the Democrats taking your guns, that's an optics point that we should fight on, and you should ask them, what happened? We had Obama for 8 years. This was literally, okay, hell on earth. A black president for Republicans? What guns did he take? None. Nobody came after your guns. Nothing happened. We had Donald Trump for 4 years, and he came for bump stocks. And he took them for a while. I think that got overturned. Then we had Biden for 4 years. Did he take any of your guns? No. This is bullshit, right? That's an optic point that's worth fighting on. Who took your fucking guns on the Democratic Party when Democrats were president? That's not true. If anybody's taking your guns right now, it's Republicans, because they're taking away your ability to even buy them by just raping the fucking economy, okay?
Sure. I mean, I think I've recently had a conversation with a conservative, literally about the trans sports thing, and I had a similar kind of tact where I just they started in on the, man, can you believe this trans sports stuff? And I'm not a sports guy. I don't really give a shit about sports just in general. And I was like, I definitely hear a lot of people complaining about it, and I really don't know enough about that topic to have a debate with you, but I will be honest with you, my big concern is really more around the healthcare for trans people than them being in sports. And over the course of that conversation, my goal was not to make sure that trans people could play sports. It was to show this person that trans people deserve healthcare. And by the end of it, he was able to empathize with them and understand why healthcare should be provided to them in some way. We didn't get, I didn't talk to him about bottom surgery or anything, but he said, he could at the very least agree with me at that point that some amount of healthcare should be provided for trans people. And that's and so I think I get what you're saying with the kind of you pick your battles there. And yeah, okay. So that was kind of my first one. I wanted to hear, because I've heard you talk, you've had some pretty strong language about what you think Dems should do. But then I think, whenever I was first explaining it, your natural reflex is still just, ooh, I don't like that, right?
Well, I don't think they should break the law, because you agree, right? You can give too much, and then you've lost whatever it is that you were fighting for. If you stare too long into the abyss stares back at you, right? But unironically, you're watching anime?
Not anymore, thankfully.
There's got to be I'm sure there are Marvel movies or superhero movies, or there's a trope, or there's an archetype of a character that initially starts down a good path and then eventually makes more and more compromises to evil, and then he effects his desires by the end, but he's given so much of himself to this evil path that now, it's not worth it in the end, because whatever he's gotten is, fuck.
I played Warcraft 3. I know what you're talking about. Okay. So, I'm just saying, because it's interesting, because even what you just said, you think that Joe Biden should be going and harassing senators, right?
But it's legal. That's legal. Crime is legal for the president, as long as if he can prove that it's essential to his.
Okay, I mean, so for you, it's as long as you can just keep one toe within the law, we should be fucking unhinged until the Republicans, acquiesce and say, all right, we'll go back to being human
They've
beings.
shown that they're unhinged, yeah. But sometimes...
I'm not judging. I agree with you. Don't worry.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of this... Not a big fan of this parenting style, actually. Actually, I don't even like using this comparison because I don't think it's a good parenting style. But, you ever see, two boys will be roughhousing, and one guy's just, he's a little bit too rough, and the dad will come over, and let's say one of the boys smacked another one, on the back of the head with one of those plastic bats or whatever, and the dad takes the plastic bat and then he smacks the kid over the head and is like, it doesn't feel good, does it, right? I think the Republicans need that type of thing happening to them a little bit, because Republicans are just right now Republicans are operating. This is a fundamental belief I have about humans. Humans follow predictable incentives. Okay, their actions are highly predictable based on the incentive structure laid around them. And right now, the Republican incentive structure is they can destroy rule of law as much as they want because they know they'll never be punished for it and they will always be rewarded for it, right? Democrats are not going to ever be as unhinged as Republicans are when it comes to violating rule of law. And so as long as they believe that, well, then they should continue to do the unhinged things they do. I think it's right now Republicans are rationally acting when they attack things like rule of law because they only enjoy success for it and there are no failures that follow. If failures followed, I think they would change their behavior.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. This is kind of in the same vein then, I guess. Yeah, I'm glad. I was worried that you claim to be institution pilled, but I'm pretty sure I'm a little more than you.
Well, no, I'm institution pilled, but if your institution is unhinged, then you should change the institution. Yeah. And if it's going to remain unhinged, then you should be unhinged because your other opponents will be unhinged. And you're giving all of your political power for what? For nothing. You're not doing anything if you just allow them to be unhinged and you act. It's like, let's say I were to, if I was playing you in chess and I said you're not allowed to move. What if, do you know how to play chess?
I do.
If I played chess with you and I said you're not allowed to move your queen until rule 20 because that's like the etiquette, but I start using my queen on, move 4, like, do you think you gain any virtue there? Does that make you a better person than me?
Sure, and
well, it doesn't, does it? Right? You're just gonna lose games. Like, what the fuck's the point? Now, and imagine if those games are like how you fed your kids or something, right? Like, there's no virtue here in being.
One second.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I agree with that analogy, and that there's no virtue there, and that the way you're comparing it to the current political environment. I think the hard thing is whenever you look at it, it's not. The hypothetical fails a little bit because it's not the Republicans telling Democrats here are the rules, and then they break the rules. It's here's rules that have existed for a long time and that everybody thought were rules, and they're like, oh wait, actually no, they're not. We're not going to follow them. And then you raise your hand for a judge to come over and say, hey, this guy's breaking the rules, and oh, there's no judge in the room, and there never has been, and you just got totally fucked over, right?
Yeah, but then you start playing by their rules. That's what you do, right?
Oh, sure, of course. Mm-hmm. But I think that's kind of, I think the hard part, not for me, but for like whenever I'm trying to talk to people that are a little more normie pilled, or are a little afraid of kind of like this kind of confrontation, is they're saying like, well, but then they're unhinged, and I don't give any fucking oxygen to the Republicans will use it against us ground, but I wonder if there is some level of, if we start acting unhinged, how much will people that do care about politics and things like that, how many of them are going to just turn on us or just become disaffected voters, right? Like Democrats have shown their full ability to just not show up and vote. I don't think they're going to vote for Republicans, but they apparently have the full ability to just abandon the party and not vote. And finding that balance, I think, is a scary thing for a lot of sitting politicians and for a lot of people making those plans.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can try and find the balance, but like, here's the reality, okay? You know how Republicans like to say that the election was a landslide for Donald Trump?
Mm-hmm.
Factually, that is not true. Spiritually, it actually is true. And the reason why spiritually it's true is because Donald Trump should have lost that election in a Reagan tier landslide. He should have gotten obliterated. The fact that even 30% of Americans are willing to vote for somebody that shows that much disdain for a rule of law it bodes very poorly for the future of this country. So whatever messaging we have to worry about, like we've already slid over into whatever. So I think it's time to start messaging stronger, doing things that the rule of law allows us to do. And if that means sicking the DOJ on people or whatever the fuck else, then do it. And then when people realize on the other side, ooh, maybe this doesn't feel good, then we can seek to change it. And you should always be a partner in that. Like, hey, listen, I've sent the FBI to your house to harass every single lawmaker, but I'm totally open to making this illegal. Just let me know when you want to come to the table and talk. And then we'll let the officers leave your house. Like, I think that's totally fine. If that's the rules right now, because remember, there is like a virtuous part of like, I don't want to do this because it's wrong, but that's not what you're relying on when you're relying on people to be good necessarily. What you're relying on is them saying, I know that if I do this, somebody's going to do it to me and it's going to feel real bad. And when you remove that part and you're only relying on the virtue of the person when there is a whole bunch of reward for them acting unvirtuous, you're setting yourself up for disaster every single time, I think.
I mean, no, base take. I agree. Totally agree. Are you familiar with Thomas Harding at all?
Nope.
Or I'm sorry, Warren Harding. Warren Harding.
Nope.
He was a president back in the 1920s. I know you have a billion things to read, but he was prior to Trump considered the most corrupt president we ever had.
Base.
And he basically did a lot of the same things that Trump is doing, where he was just selling off assets and people would pay him for positions and things like that. But what was interesting was, and a very big difference, in my opinion, between Harding and Trump is that there was a scandal that happened in which the bribery was revealed of they were leasing some oil reserves to people illegally. And that was, that was like kind of the big overturning that like made people really just realize how bad it was.
Because it was leasing oil reserve? What do you mean by that? Like personally profiting off of?
Yeah, it's kind of a minutia. It's just that they weren't supposed to be leasing these things because they were for the like Navy, and then say they released it to some like private companies, and it was like you weren't supposed to be doing it.
Okay.
And so it actually even resulted in like a cabinet member going to prison. So,
Gotcha.
But anyways, it's interesting because when that scandal broke, though, you actually saw not only like people react, but like like newspapers were out there saying this stuff, politicians were out here saying this stuff, and it's so minor compared to what we're seeing now, and it feels like everybody is so kind of muted, or at least kind of dull to this level of corruption we're seeing. I think it's an interesting comparison to see, not just that like, oh, there have been corrupt people before, but I think also just kind of how dark the like Republican Party has gotten. It's kind of similar in like whenever Nixon got caught, right? And there was these full investigations and they were willing to impeach him and all these things, right? And now we don't see any of that. I just thought that those are kind of, it's an interesting comparison. People try to compare Nixon and Trump, but Nixon didn't have quite the same kind of like personal bribery and
I feel like, unless I don't know anything about Watergate, I don't feel like Watergate is even close to the corruption we've seen under the current administration. Like Watergate would be like a meme. Like,
it feels a lot more like just kind of like a personal power and like, abuse of the system in order to like aggrandize themselves with just the power of the office. Whereas like right now, we're like, it's just, he's becoming personally wealthy based off of it.
Yeah.
And
well,
just
and I also think, I think something that's important to look at for the current administration as well is I think that it should be really scary when people are acting in ways and they don't even have shame about it. I think that's a really scary world to be in. And I think one of the scariest facets of the current administration is there is no shame about the open level of corruption and disdain that they have for the American system. I think that's one of the one of the most eerie things. Because for a lot of this corruption shit, somebody asked me the other day in chat, like, isn't this like, aren't you basically doing the same thing that QAnon did? And like I could say like, no, none of my stuff is QAnon because this is all stuff that all of them just talk about publicly always. Like they'll literally just openly say shit about how, oh, we got all this pro bono law work when we extorted these law firms and shit. And it's like, it's just crazy. There's no shame whatsoever.
It's interesting how, for some reason, Republicans have found a way to do all this without also putting out, thousands of hidden clues in media and on the money and, on maps at the UN. Somehow they're able to just do it openly rather than with cryptic messages that don't actually mean anything. Okay, well then, one thing I was thinking about when I read, I was reading the Pragmatic Papers. Miss Agent M had a really good article this week, and it was talking about Doge's cuts and how they're affecting poor people and they're to the benefit of rich people, things like that. And it made me kind of think about it because how familiar are you with like how Medicare, FEMA, unemployment insurance funding from the government, how familiar are you with how that stuff like is managed and kind of dispersed once it leaves the federal government?
Probably not that familiar with it. Like FEMA and all of that. Well, some stuff is like managed exclusively by the federal government, right? When you talk about like, I think like things like parts of Medicare and FEMA and stuff, but some stuff like I think Medicaid, a lot of that has to do with monies, I think, awarded to the states, and the states are basically on their own for how they want to disperse that. Or like unemployment insurance, I think, is handled by the states a lot, but I couldn't get into the minutiae of any of it.
Right, that works. For the vast majority of these programs and the ones that are being cut, the federal government is saying, here are funds, here are how you are supposed to spend these funds, and then the states take it from there, right? There might be some, like you said, there might be some that are directly controlled by the federal government. Like I believe if you see dialysis clinics, that is federally managed under a Nixon era law. Whereas if you see like Medicare and certain forms of Medicaid, those are the state governments managing that. And then the federal government comes in and matches with a certain amount of funds, right? So you'll see, I'm sure you've seen the like, oh, Medicare spending is $880 billion a year, right? Well, only about 600 to 610 million of that is actually federal funds. Based on the wealth, the GDP, or other metrics of a state, the federal government will provide 50 to 70% of funding.
Okay.
So we see, okay, Doge is coming in. They're saying we're going to cut this stuff, but right now there's nothing saying that these states how these cuts get implemented, right? So let's say they were getting 100 billion before, now they're getting 80 billion because the Doge cuts or the budget cuts. Well, those states could choose where to pull it back. And a lot of people are worried that they're going to pull back, the more expensive chemo, things like that, or raise prices on prescriptions. But I've heard you say that you think that whenever Republicans take actions, that it should be that people should try to make it where only Republicans suffer, or where Republicans suffer more than non-Republicans. So what would you say if we have that cut, 20% cut, and Gavin Newsom comes out and goes, okay, well, I'm going to look at the voter rolls of the last election, and we're going to reduce funding based off of how strongly they supported Donald Trump, and prioritize areas that voted against him.
I think
what would you think about
I would be against it, but not for the hypothetical reason. I would just be against it because that would be insanely politically ineffective, I would imagine. But like not principally against it, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Well, because, right, I mean, going back to what you were talking about before, right, we want them to hurt. We want them to feel the pain.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure if you were to do that in California, I think most citizens would just, especially if they had family members in the rest, are like, ooh, we're really just going to start fucking half of our citizens up or whatever. I don't know. That sounds like it would be, you're on a really iffy path there.
Sure. I mean, we can, optics maxing aside here. I mean, so
yeah,
you're
optics
saying
maxing
that,
aside, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it. I really like, I don't know if this term has ever been used before, but I really like that Gavin Newsom describes California as a donor state now, because California gives more in federal taxes than it gets back. I think people being aware of that, I think it's important. I think it's good to know that. Yeah. But I would be opposed to that thing you're mentioning just because it sounds like it would be really politically ineffective. Not because I'd be principally opposed to it, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. So then, as far as, that's surprising. I thought, so, let's say, well, we've already seen Donald Trump do that, right? He's already withheld a lot of funds from blue states because of them just being blue, right? I believe
I don't think he's done it yet, but he keeps threatening it, I think.
Funding. 1 second.
Like, I think with California, I think he threatened to do this if they didn't do something with a water table or something, but I don't know if he's actually gone through with it yet.
Okay, maybe so. But if Trump, let's say Trump does do it, right? Let's say Trump comes out and goes, well, I'm not going to do it, and he even, it's not even that crazy of a hypothetical for him to even just explicitly say, I'm not doing it because they're Democrats over there, right? Let's say he does that. Is this going to be, would you say this should be part of our tit for tat with them? This is the rules that they're doing?
Potentially. I mean, at some point I'm going to have to draw a line. I don't know where we would draw this line, but we're not even close to hitting that line now as Democrats, because Democrats typically just don't engage in this behavior. Yeah, so I don't know where exactly I would draw the line here, but the issue is just that right now Republicans are allowed to act unhinged with impunity, and they don't suffer at all for it. And I think if they were suffering for it, I don't think they would act the same way.
Well, right, and I'm just saying I'm handing you a legal way in which Democrats could respond in an unhinged way. And I hear you that this is not as effective and it's not as personally self-serving to the Democrats possibly. But let's say they did it, and then next election, we can see, you and I can see in the future right now. And if they do it, it would win them the next election.
Then yeah, fucking A, hell yeah, do it. Yeah, fuck it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's on that. So now I want to ask you about that kind of the mechanics of it. Do you think then, because to me what it feels like, that feels like we're putting party over kind of their, you're asking a politician to put their party over their duty to their constituents, right? And I think what we're going to be, you're going to make an argument of, well, they have to do it so that they can stay in power, so that we can do the good things down the line.
No, I would argue they're doing it for their constituents, because the majority of their voters are Democrats anyway. If they're willing to do this, right?
Oh, you're saying but they're helping the greater majority. We just got to let these poor rural people die off.
I guess. I mean, they accuse Democrats of doing that anyway, right? So yeah, fuck it. Why not?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm fine with becoming the villain they accuse us of being, but I just, I'm trying to just kind of push it out. I mean, then as far as we won the Wisconsin race. So now they're talking about these gerrymandering can be done along the lines of Democrats. I think that a big flaw in the Democratic Party is that whenever you look at those kind of local, state areas, those lower governments, I think it's a lot harder for them to. 1 second.
To be super politically partisan.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah,
it's
that's true.
I think that there's these options for us out there, and to me, I think it's easy for us whenever we're not politicians to say, "Oh yeah, they should go do that." And I keep seeing Democratic politicians really hesitating. Right? You saw it with Schumer and all those other people that just kind of like blinked whenever they got challenged and stuff like that.
Sure. Although I would, as much as I hate him, Schumer and Jeffries might have ended up being correct in the don't give them an excuse and just sit by and watch the fucking Trumples destroy themselves. And Jesus Christ, I mean, so far maybe that was the play. I mean, because it seems like that's happening. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. Local politics is a lot different than national politics because you are more connected to your voters, and you will suffer a lot if you start to like attack those people hardcore. It's not the same as like on the national level per se. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's easy for Donald Trump to withhold things because he doesn't live near any of the people that are being hurt.
Yeah,
right?
correct.
Like, the millions of people dying from U.S. aid will never ever be able
in a
to
U.S. election. Yeah.
protest in front of him. Right. So whenever I look at Democrats and they're like, blinking, they're hesitating, right? I'm wondering, is it well, this just means we need to elect more unhinged people, or do you say this is just like we need to somehow inform them that this is okay from the electorate? Like, how do you signal to your politicians, right? I mean, I know there's this mass emailing and mailing and phone calling campaign that everyone's doing, and they should do, and it's great. Sorry, that sounded very condescending, but no, people should do it. It's great. But do you see something that like whenever like the electorate should be doing now, because we're 2 years out, we're 18 months out from any kind of election where this matters?
I think the problem is the
What do you
Democratic
think?
Party is still catching up on two key areas. One is they haven't figured out how to message yet in the influencer era. And the people that have figured that out are at the fringes of the party, AOC and Bernie, although thank God AOC is kind of like moving more towards a governing position, or she's made those moves significantly, which I think is good. So the messaging part they have to figure out. But then another part, do you ever say how old you are?
Right now, I'm not doing any of that.
Well, fuck you. Okay. Do you remember the 2016 election?
The 2016. I think that was before I was born.
Fuck you. The reason why the 2016 election was so fucking nightmarish for so many American citizens is because a lot of American citizens just didn't think a person like Donald Trump that acts the way he acts and says the things he says. A lot of people just didn't think it was possible that a person like that could win an election in the United States. That the people in this country are just not like that. They would never be okay with something like that. And so when he won, it showed a lot of people that there are many in the United States who are a lot different than they would have expected them to be otherwise. And that was a very scary moment, I think, for a lot of Americans, me included. I thought it was insane to me. I think that the Democrats are still having that moment again with Trump winning re-election. And it's hard to tell, like, are Americans just like clueless? Or are Americans actually okay with all of the crazy shit that the admin is doing? It's hard to tell, and then therefore it's hard to adjust your messaging and your strategies in that environment because you don't know what ordinary citizens are even willing to tolerate right now. I think that's still like a really confusing thing for a lot of Democrats.
I mean, I definitely agree. I remember I was in an argument with one of my communist friends right after Trump got elected, and I had a hard time understanding it. And he said, I don't want to give him too much credit here. I don't know if this is necessarily right, but I think that kind of the sentiment he was arguing was right, where he said, well, a black guy got elected, and that made all the racists come out and vote for not the black guy. And I think that's a bit reductive. But I remember in that argument just being like incredulous that he would say that, just because it was like, no, like the racism still exists, but that can't be, what I'm looking at right now.
Yeah.
Right. It can't be that simple. And stupidly, I was naive enough to think like, no, people aren't that racist. They wouldn't do it just because of that. Right. And it I've been proven wrong horribly, and it is kind of an interesting thing where you just see just like you used the word virtue earlier, and it is kind of scary to see how we seem to be living in a country that like has no virtue, and these people have been among us this whole time, and now we have to like kind of level with that fact, right? Like it would be great. Like, the reason why we wanted to exist off of norms is because we believed everybody had virtue.
Sure.
But now, whenever we see that there is no virtue, now all of a sudden we have to talk about like why we shouldn't be using
Well, but
norms.
it's, yeah, but I mean, there's also, and even I go back and forth on this too. It's also like, well, how much is a lack of virtue versus how much is just like a lack of understanding as well, right? Like for the Abrego Garcia thing, like I'm sure my hope is the vast majority of Americans that are okay with him being deported really truly just believe this was an MS-13 gang guy who was supposed to be deported anyway. And the whole stuff about due process, like a lot of people just don't understand any of that. Have you ever done like a public defense work or whatever?
I've done stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm sure that there's a ton of your clients that, I'm sure the majority of your clients, maybe every client, just doesn't understand literally anything about the legal system whatsoever. And criminal law is even like the simpler stuff to understand, right? Ignoring all like constitutional stuff and anything else. It's just a lot of people just don't understand anything. And I'm hoping that's kind of still where we're at. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And there's a lawyer named Pisco that was in a 6-lawyer debate over the weekend about
Those
that
people
very
are
case.
evil. Those people are evil. Okay.
Okay, I'm just saying,
Those are
there are the
different
people
people.
that seem to be educated that are still able to go, you know what? Actually, it's not that bad, and that's fair. Like, I think that those people are like, even if they do exist, they are. I pray to God they are, unique persons in America. I hope, but it is I think there's a bit of, the Republican Party is able to always justify what they're doing, and people are happy to take that. They're happy to take their explanation of like, oh yeah, he beat his wife and he had tattoos, and there was a full trial that determined that without any doubt he was a member of MS-13, right? Like, people are happy to jump onto that. And for me, it's really sad to see, like, I know some very smart people that are just eating this shit up, and it's very blackpilling in the sense that, like, I thought better of these people and they would care. And whenever I talk to these people, I'm able to have a conversation with them and get them to admit these things and say, like I know someone who's very conservative. I hold them in very high regard, and they're pro-Trump for some reason. And I'll have conversations with them where, as long as the word Democrat doesn't come up and Trump doesn't come up, I can get them to agree
on a whole bunch of shit.
Socialized healthcare. Yeah. And then, right, we turn on the fucking TV, and some idiot from the White House is up there talking about how, we're trying to fight against fentanyl coming in from Canada, and they're just lapping it up. And it's kind of this thing where it's like, I think that there's some level of like, they don't engage with it realistically because they think it's all a game. But at the other side, it's like, okay, well, how much are these people lying to my face? You talk way too much about Israel-Palestine, so I know you know about the Second Intifada, and the sentiment of that the Jews had, the Israelis had after it, where it was like, wasn't there this like huge like shock of like, we lived next to these people and now they're like, I work with this guy and he's now trying to kill people. Wasn't there some kind of like shock?
Yeah, there were a lot of like liberal Israelis who, after the Second Intifada, you can look at Benny Morris's own writings on this, who are like, oh, never mind, I understand now. Palestinians will never want to live in peace with us, and they will always want to murder us. So all of this peace stuff was a huge fucking waste of time. There were a lot of Israelis that had that feeling after the Second Intifada, yeah.
Right, and like, as we are like walking our way down the Bill of Rights and crossing them off one by one, right, I'm looking over at these Republicans that have like told me their fantasies of using their guns to kill politicians that take their rights away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the fuck's going on, guys? And they're like, no, it's actually cool. It's actually based. And it's like, so for me, I'm kind of it feels like at times there's that moment of like, oh, okay, like this is all, one, it's just an act with them, and two, they have absolutely no problem just lying to my face.
Well, they're not lying. I think it's just there are qualifiers to everything, and people aren't always aware of what all the qualifiers are. Like, when people talk about how important their rights are and they would never allow the government to come after their rights, there's probably just a lot more at play there than even they realize when they say that. Like somebody like, I bet Wittgenstein has something really good on this, but I don't read books, so fuck that. Or at least I don't read philosophy. When somebody says something like, I'm like liberals, progressives say this a lot, I am really in favor of rehabilitative justice. I think that it's wrong what we do when we, oh my God, actually, you know what, forget what I was just about to say. Do you know that Father Brown dude? Have you ever heard of that book series written by, is it G.K. Chesterton?
About the detective guy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that? There's like a story where a guy comes into town. I think everybody thought he was dead or whatever, and he mentions that he got into like a duel with his brother or something, or the brother tried to kill him or something, and he managed to survive, and he came back, and he had to kill his brother in self-defense, but the townspeople forgave him, and they were like, we understand, it's okay, like you're cool, you're here, everything is chill, like we know that you killed your brother, and maybe that wasn't great, but we forgive you. And the Father Brown guy was apparently a big like stickler for, you have to do penance, you need to do contrition, you have to show that you're like actually apologetic for this. And the people in the town thought that Father Brown was a huge fucking asshole because like Jesus, like he he had to kill his brother, but it was self-defense, whatever. And I think by the end of the short story, apparently you find out that it was actually the other brother that was trying to defend himself, and the brother that was in the town had actually murdered his other brother, like for no reason. It was just a murder. And the townspeople all switched from, we should forgive this guy, and we understand, to we need to kill this guy, or he needs to be sentenced to death, or fuck this guy. But Father Brown's position had remained unchanged. He said, well, you should ask God for forgiveness, do contrition, and all of that. And the observation, I think, by the end of that little story that Father Brown made was his position was clear, that if you do something wrong, you need to have the person do contrition and apologize and then forgive them. But a lot of people only allow that for things that they don't actually consider to be that wrong or wrong at all. Like a lot of people will say things like, oh, like I think we should forgive that father who shot the dude walking into the courthouse that raped and murdered his daughter. Everybody will be like, I think that this guy should get off. Like we should forgive this guy. But you're not actually forgiving that guy. You just don't think he did anything wrong in the first place. So then to bring that back to the hypothetical I was going to give, if you ask somebody, do you think that the criminal justice system should be for rehabilitation? Every progressive will say, yeah, of course it should be. And it's like, oh, okay. What about for a guy that rapes 5-year-old girls? Now they're like, no, that guy should get raped and murdered in prison. Okay, so then it sounds like you probably don't agree necessarily with this broad idea of rehabilitation. It's like there are some people that you think are in jail probably because they shouldn't be, or the crimes they didn't commit were that bad, and you think they should be let out, but there's something else at play there. And a lot of people aren't even aware of it themselves, I think, and that's a big issue you run into. When conservatives say things like, I believe in the right to freedom of speech and all of this, and it's like, oh, okay, what about the right of like trans people to be on the corner saying whatever? It's like, oh, I don't know about this, That I think that's the issue. So they're not lying, they're just unaware of what's even happening. Sorry, okay. That was a long...
Sorry, I just got back. I had to step away for a second. What you said, Father Brown?
Wait, you're trolling me, right?
Yeah, I'm totally.
Fuck you.
No, I think that's a good. I think that's a very a good soliloquy on this, and I think that for me then it's a lot of it. Whenever I'm interacting with people who I'm trying to either suss out their beliefs or challenge.
Yeah, what do you
them.
Actually believe? Yeah, because it feels very disingenuous.
Right, and it's kind of they're super happy to say the most broad, almost self-aggrandizing statement of like, you can swing your fist as long as it doesn't hit my nose or where the fuck the saying is, and defend your right to say whatever.
I mean, what's the thing they used to say all the time? I might disagree with you, but I'll die for your right to say it or whatever, Right,
and I have recently been like, okay, that's a good starting point. And like you said, like asking about the trans people on the corner, and like it's whittle it down. And so many times it really just feels a lot like if someone showed up at my front door with a badge and said, I'm going to take away your gun, this person might fight back. That seems to be usually what it boils down to, right? Like it's like it just turns into the most like personal self-protective thing rather than like they have no concept of society and like we need to protect this right for everybody, and it's just this kind of thing where like what is it, there's the joke of like someone gets shot by a cop and you have to wait till to find out what race it is to know how much you want to like learn the facts of the case, right?
Yeah.
Because like,
or it's that hypothetical where it's like, would you rather
right?
be in the forest alone with a bear or a man? And like, women will be like, oh, a bear, men are rapists. Like, would you rather be in the forest alone with a bear or a black man? And now the answer changes. Like, well, fuck, I can't say I don't want to be near a black man. Now I'm racist. Yeah, just the people's like the proximity to things influences how people feel. Like the identity of people changes how people feel. Yeah, it's cringe.
Well, and it's like. My biggest, like, the strangest thing is, like, just once I frame things in a way that someone can empathize with it, they all of a sudden they become so much more knowledgeable on this subject, right? Like consent, right? Like I remember talking with someone who was, like, what's the big deal? I don't really see what the big, come on, like it's, you say yes, and then what, you change your mind, and like these girls are just going after this guy. And I was like, okay, like, let's have a conversation. Like, have you ever gone to a bathhouse before? And he's like, what? And I was like, like, have you ever gone to a gay bathhouse before? Have you ever been inside one, seen one, see what happens there? And he's like, no. Like I'm pretty sure he thought that those didn't actually exist. He thought they were just some kind of weird, like, crazy thing. I was like, no, these exist. And let's say you were in there and you didn't know it was a gay bathhouse, and a guy walks up and he wants to give you a massage, and he asks if he can give you a massage, and for whatever reason you're feeling it and you say, yeah, sure, whatever. You think he's a masseuse that works there, and then he starts raping you and you say no.
Jesus
right?
Christ. Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden that guy knew what the fuck consent was.
Sure.
Right? There's a joke that Andrew Dice Clay would say. He was on it was fun. No, this is a side. It doesn't matter. This doesn't help. But it's this thing where, like, whenever I can, whenever they look at immigrants as non-people, all, what due process was. There's too many of them. We can't give them trials. But then, the minute one of them gets tied up in this, they're going to be like, oh, well, this is a mistake, and we need to do these things. And so you're right in the sense that, like, it seems like people have these big expansive, or they have all these qualifiers. But to me, it seems like really it boils down to just an inability to empathize with the situation. I ran into this. I was doing some criminal appeals work on this case for a pedophile, and it's interesting. If you're accused of pedophilia in America, you lose a lot of your evidentiary rights at trial. Like, hearsay is allowed in a lot of circumstances. And
why? Because children can't testify, or what? That's weird.
We don't like pedophiles. That's pretty much it. It's
well, I don't know. There can't be. Is there really a rule that says if you're accused of raping a child, hearsay is now permissible, or are you just saying that, like, a judge is more likely to let certain things slide?
I'm giving you the layman's version. I can get more detail.
Oh no, okay.
So if you,
you're good.
It's like essentially, there's a lot of ways to get around hearsay rules in pedophile cases.
Okay.
Ways in which that in any other case literally could not happen. It would be so hard to get over these evidentiary rules in any other case other than only pedophilia.
Okay.
And some rape, but some non-pedophilic rape. And I was doing this work, and it was interesting because it was real early on when I first started doing kind of this area. And the partner that I was working with, I was like, why are we making this argument? Like, why are we showing up to say that this guy didn't rape this person because of this? This is a rule. It's on the books. The legislature passed it. The courts have upheld it. Mm-hmm. And he said, because it's violating hearsay laws. It constitutionally. This is a violation of due process. It doesn't matter if we all agree on it, if this guy's the worst person on the planet. And at the end of the day, even if we did get this specific part overturned, he's still probably going to be in jail. But that doesn't mean we should stand up and fight for it, right? And it's a really interesting thing because, like, whenever I talk to people about, areas that I've worked in, whenever I talk about that part, so many people say, I could never do that. I could never do that. And I remember when I worked there, people would ask to get taken off these cases to work non-pedophile cases. Mm-hmm. And so that was really interesting for me to see because for me, like, I want to be principled. I don't know if I necessarily am. So I stuck on it and for the time that I was there and, fought those fights and they all lost because everybody hates pedophiles. So they're not going to give them a break. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting because even in those, like, learned societies, right, or these people that know better, right, because we were talking about that before, a lot of this is people not knowing better. People that know better still can't get away from that. And so whenever I see very educated people also making these same kind of, like, lies to my face on one hand, and then later coming out and saying, oh, actually, I didn't care about that, right, it more and more makes me feel like, damn, is the Republican Party just full of, like, people that just literally are just lying to my face? Or is it, as you say, maybe they're just uneducated, maybe there's, like, it just feels like you've made the complaint that whenever you confront a Republican about something, they go, well, I don't know anything about that.
Sure.
Right? but you don't believe that, right? You don't think that what's happening is there's a willful ignorance and they're not reading the news.
Well, sometimes it can
they're
be.
lying to your face.
I think sometimes it can be they don't know about it, but even the selection of knowledge that they have is very sus. And because of the certain issue that we're talking about, people might turn that intuition off. But this is a strong intuition that people have, that if you have just having knowledge about certain things makes you a little bit sus. Like if a friend, and like it's so funny because everybody knows this intuitively, but they pretend they don't. Like conservatives will say things like, oh, well, if it's a true fact, it's a true fact. It doesn't matter. You can't judge that. And if somebody were to say something like, oh, like I traveled to France last summer, it was so cool. And somebody's like, oh, France, that's awesome. I think they have really beautiful beaches. And isn't the age of consent there 14? If somebody said that, even if that, I don't know if that's true, but even if that's true, we'd be like, why the fuck do you even know that? Wait, what the fuck? What? Wait, what do you mean? What? Like just somebody saying that would make you do a double take. Or if somebody didn't know a thing about a certain thing, people would also be like, wait, what do you mean you don't know this? But like people know this intuitively, but when it comes to the news, people shut their brains off, or it's political bullshit and all of that.
It can be just frustrating at times. It makes a lot of people say they get really like with the black pilling stuff, where they're like, oh, I'm going to just check out from politics. I don't even want to look at politics for a while. I just want, right? And for me, it feels like I don't feel that way, but I do feel that way with regards to engaging with conservatives. You've complained that they don't want to argue and stuff anymore and things like that. Mm-hmm. And at this point, for me, like, I've already like, there's some friends in my life where it's like, they were just like, oh yeah, no, I'm like super open, big Trump guy and things like that, and I was just like, fuck, like
it's a hard one. Yeah,
it's not like I want to cut you out of my life because you're pro-Trump, but like I genuinely don't want to have conversations with you whenever you're like celebrating horrible shit, and then I've got to keep the peace and not, right, because like I don't mind fighting people on stuff, but it's also like we're here with other people, we're not here for this shit. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be the guy that fights with my friends all the time. And so for me it feels like I feel like I'm just wanting to disengage with conservatives, and maybe that is the right thing to do because not everything has to be bipartisan. But
there should be some maybe social consequences for being unhinged. That's not totally unheard of.
Yeah, sure.
Depending on the
but on a grander scale, I think you would agree with the concept that when different groups stop talking, often they start fighting. Right? I don't think we're going to have two Americas where there's the Democrat America and the Republican America, and then never the twain shall meet, and everybody's happy with just our little pockets of everybody agreeing with it. If that breakdown happens and it starts here and works its way up, mm-hmm. or maybe the other way around, right? That to me is where I feel like more afraid of conflict in the future coming from, is where.
And that's fair, and I think people should worry about that. But I think people are just like. Consequences need to happen for certain things because there is a deterrent effect. There is a social modeling of behavior as well. And when we lose all of that deterrence because we're afraid of a negative outcome, then what happens is you just accelerate those negative outcomes. Quite literally, it's appeasement, right? And so I think people need to be a bit more aware that it shouldn't be the case that we have to tolerate what are truly unhinged and radical crazy things in society, that we have to tolerate that because we don't want to hurt people's feelings when these people are barely considering, like certain people, humans, right? You're not even considered having rights in the United States if you're a lawful permanent resident, right? You're going to tell me you're going to have conservatives fighting harder for fucking 2-day-old fetuses than for full adult people who are lawful permanent residents to enjoy rights in the United States? That's crazy to me. It's not okay. And I think it's okay to show some backbone and not allow people to sneak away with this really silly, ridiculous argument of, oh, it's just politics, LOL.
Mm. Well, and you mentioned the appeasement word there, and which is interesting after your full-throated praise of Schumer and his masterful play. Do you think that that balance of kind of we need to fight back versus we need to communicate / appease? Because let's say, I've thought about this too, where some people argue that the reason that Neville Chamberlain appeased Hitler was because at the time France and Britain could literally not have gone to war. There was no there was no political will, and also the material just wasn't really there for them to begin the war. I'm not making that argument, but let's say we're in that situation here. Do you think that, if Schumer had stood up and fought right there, let's say, we don't even consider a Doge destruction of the government in the background. Let's just say he stands up and fights, right? Do you think there's enough will behind the Democrats, or there's enough faith in the Democrats that if they make that stand and fight too early right now, that it's all going to shatter, right? Because if we force the issue and they're holding too much power, then the Democrats just get washed away, and we have accelerated. We have pushed ourselves into a dictatorship because we didn't pick the right moment.
I mean, I don't know. That's a calculation that people have to make. I thought that fighting there would have been good. I mean, I still think it probably would have been good, but I mean, different people are going to calculate that in different ways. As long as we're doing that calculation and we're not just taking some principled stance against ever fighting, then I'm okay with people trying to figure out where the right moment to move is.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Okay. Well, hey, everyone, I was enjoying Easter, so I didn't get on Sunday and plug it, but the new edition of the Pragmatic Papers is out. We have got a European correspondent now, and we are expanding. There's more stuff to read. Nothing from Destiny this week, sorry, but there's still a lot of really good stuff. Everyone should go read it. Destiny even could possibly read it. It would be great. But let me get out of your hair. Appreciate you talking to me.
Yeah, I love you. Be careful, buddy.
All right. Love you too.
See you later, bye. I'm gonna grab a Red Bull and then we'll watch some meme. Hold on.